Hi Chris, how are you?
Good afternoon, Rod. I'm well. Bit slow at clapping as usual. I've got zero hand-eye coordination, I think.
That's secrets the podcast listeners never find out about the clapping.
This is true. So it's episode 117. It's the 19th of April, so we're recording early because one of us, not me, is jetting off to foreign climates.
Well, does the Eurostar count as jetting? I don't know.
I just assumed you were flying. I've never been on the Eurostar, but I would love to go. I just want to try it out, just to go in the big, long tunnel.
Yeah, I've done it once before in 2017, 2018, something like that. I went to Paris for a conference, 3 hours from Swansea to London, 20 minutes to get across London, another 2.5 hours or something to get. So by the time you sort of figure in all your sitting around at airports and parking and all that kind of stuff, it actually works out probably a little bit faster. And there's a lot less faff with luggage, that's for sure. So I'm quite excited. I've never gone to Belgium on it before, so that'll be fun.
So you're going to do 4 countries by train then?
Yeah, I'll be going through one. I'll go through. You don't need to change in France. You can just go straight through to Brussels. And then I've got a local train when I get to Brussels as well to get to Hasselt, which is where I'm going.
Oh, cool. Well, I'm jealous because I love going on the train. I just find it really relaxing. I would very much enjoy the low friction hassle of not having to take all your clothes off to go through the scanner and empty all the metal and laptops and what have you. So I would quite like to do it, and I'd like to do it with my kids one day.
Well, I'll report back on it, I think, just because it's travelling with different devices and, train rather than plane, so I've got quite familiar with planes over the last few years. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to it, although it's an 8 o'clock start on a Sunday morning to get there to be there for the Monday, for the start of the conference I'm going to, so
Yeah, what can you do, hey? And how long are you there for?
Back on Tuesday night, late on Tuesday night.
Okay, so a good couple of days.
Yeah, so this will hopefully drop as long as we don't make any mistakes during the recording of it or the upload of it on early hours of Tuesday morning as usual. So no interruptions for our beautiful podcast listeners and viewers.
Good work, because it's all down to you.
I try.
Should we get straight into follow-up then?
Let's do some follow-up because we've got a fair bit of it. It's going to be a slightly odd show for obvious reasons because we've already done one this week. But there's quite a lot of news and quite a lot of sort of follow-up on things we talked about before. So the first one was iOS 17.4 brought with it downloading to the EU and app browser choice and all that kind of stuff. And we've talked about that a few times before now. iOS 17.5 Beta 2 opens up the ability for developers to provision apps from their website. So this was mandated by the DMA as well, and now it's actually a thing you can do.
Yeah, and there was a long gap between Beta 1 and Beta 2, so I'm assuming Apple was doing lots of stuff in the background. There's very little in the current beta train for most people. This is literally feels like a final release just to appease the EU before we hopefully get into iOS 17. But yeah, this is quite cool because I thought the day would never come when Apple would allow people to download from a website. Obviously, we don't get it as big sad trombone. We're not in the EU anymore. The rest of the world don't get it, but obviously our EU cousins do all have this functionality. So it'd be quite cool when it launches. And it feels like it's going to take a while before it starts filtering through, like with the alternative app stores and what have you, marketplaces. It's going to take a while to get some, I guess, momentum behind it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And it does still carry a fee. The core technology fee is still payable for distributing your apps this way. I got to think the other shoe is going to drop there as well. I don't think the EU are going to like the core technology fee for side-loaded apps. We'll see, I guess. But yeah, if you're in the EU and you're on iOS 17.5 Beta 1, you can go and hit the Alt Store, which I think is now an alternative marketplace, and you can download the Clipboard app and Delta. But more news on that in a minute.
So should we roll into the next news items we've got? And this is Phil Schiller, so former, I was going to say chief marketing officer, but he wasn't. He was senior vice president of worldwide marketing. I think I got that right. And he said, we don't actually know whether the App Store is profitable or not. And we never took any minutes in meetings. And that's pretty much summarises that article, I think. The minutes in meetings one, though, I did pick up on this because I've worked with a few American companies. And it's quite interesting that America as a culture for these kinds of board meetings famously don't take minutes, and that way there's no comeback. Whereas I think in the UK we have a very different culture in that we do take minutes to stop any comeback, if you see what I mean, so to make sure everything is documented and minuted. So I think that's just very different corporation cultures, and I've seen that outside of the tech space.
Yeah, I find this slightly surprising as, I'm from the university. Before that, I worked in the NHS, so I'm fairly familiar with public sector organisations and the way we do things, and we pretty much minute everything. And what you've just said confirms what I thought happened in industry in the UK as well, that things are minuted for a reason. So yeah, we did say we'd do this by that date, or this was a problem, and we've all been in the meeting where somebody holds their hands up and points at whoever's taking the minutes and goes, this isn't for minuting, because you're about to say something, and that's an exception rather than the rule. And this seems to be the rule rather than the exception, as they don't want things documented. They don't want things coming back to bite them. But I still find it surprising. The biggest company in the world that makes decisions like this, that's an issue, I think, for minuting, but fine. If it's corporate culture, it's corporate culture. I wonder if Dell behave the same way, or Google behave the same way. Probably Google absolutely do. But saying something like he doesn't know whether the App Store is profitable, come on.
They know. There's a big spreadsheet with all this worked out in it.
Of course it is.
They must
There's some financial guy somewhere sort of, doing fist bumps with all his colleagues as he goes down the corridor all the time. Of course the App Store's profitable. That's why they're defending it so heavily.
Yeah, 100%. And they've got some spreadsheet and they've got some accounting policy, that how they write off certain costs and how they attribute this to every iPhone sale or whatever it may be. So they know they're making some money on it. Apple makes money on everything. So, yeah. I don't believe this. It's interesting how they keep wielding Schiller out every now and again, though, because he was meant to have left and become the first fellow, but yet he still seems quite active.
Courage. That's why he hasn't left. Courage.
He's got all the courage.
It's a deep call back to the trash can MacBook Pro, Mac Pro.
Mac Pro, yeah. Ugh, let's not go back to that.
Let's not go back to that. Let's move forward and talk about another NES emulator. So we talked about the first NES emulator, which you displayed on your phone last week. I got pulled because the developer realized it was problematic, and Riley Testalt, I can't get his name right, had made not a complaint, but a comment that this was based on one of his high school projects. Anyway, another one called Bimmy appeared and then also rapidly disappeared. The developer pulled it out of fear, apparently.
Pulled it out of fear, what, of Nintendo taking him to court for squillions.
Yeah, but that doesn't line up with our next story, or our next couple of stories, really. That the Alt Store and Riley's apps are emulators for old Nintendo consoles. I think Nintendo's problem is if you emulate the Switch, not if they emulate something older and older. No, it's Nintendo. They've probably got problems with that too. But they've allowed, historically, these, other emulators to continue, so I don't really understand why the developer of Bimmy was quite so worried. No one pressured me to it, but I got more nervous as the day went on, he wrote. Apparently it was much more promising, but actually it would have been flattened completely by what came next anyway, so it's probably not a bad thing that it's gone.
Yeah, and sometimes taking something off before you're asked to is sometimes the right thing to do for everybody's well-being, so I can understand why he's done it. But we have got the next story up with the Alt Store is now live in Europe, so this is alternative marketplace. The Alt Store's been running for a long time. I think we've commented on it before, and you could sideload it onto your phone if you used, I think it was Xcode. You could put it on there, but now it's official in the EU. You can use it, and they charge €1.50 per year, which kind of makes sense. This is to cover the core technology fee, which I think is quite smart. It's not a lot of money, but most people won't mind paying €1. I was going to say €1.50, but just to cover their core technology fee. But bundled inside it is Delta, which is the emulator that this. I can't remember the guy's name. You've just said it.
Riley Testalt.
Riley Testalt wrote, which was then the open source code for the iGBA one that got kicked out last week. So they're releasing Delta with inside that, and then they've also released this Delta emulator on the regular app store for in essence the rest of the world, which I have downloaded, but I don't know what to do with it because I haven't got any GBA cartridges and games, because it really is designed for, you buy a device to put your cartridge into, you suck the ROM file off of the cartridge, say onto your Mac, and then you could transfer that onto your iOS device, and then you can play all your GBA games and various other Nintendo games on it.
Yeah,
have you tried this out?
Again, no iPhone, Chris. I guess I could have tried it on my iPad, but I am not living in the future of iOS at the moment. I'm off to one side of all this, so I'm watching it but not taking part. I tried to use Alt Store before it went through App Marketplace and all the rest of it, and I think my issue with it was because I am a developer and a registered developer, and my iPad was registered for development, and I'd had an app in test flight, I couldn't then register it to be, a source for however alt store used to deploy apps, and it would say you've reached your maximum number of app installs on this device, and I could never get it to work on my iPad. I didn't want to do it on my phone. For lots of reasons. Mostly because I want a nice big screen on something if I'm playing with an emulator. I don't want to be limited to an iPhone screen. This is an interesting story. So, yay, well done. We've now got a marketplace. And it's more than just the emulator. It's also this Clippy persistent clipboard app as well, which again, I think that's a great thing, and I'm amazed that this isn't sort of something that Apple offers. Let's face it, they don't offer it on the Mac either. You need to install a third-party app to have a system-wide persistent clipboard manager, which every other operating system does out of the box. The ability to look back 15 pastes and see what you had in your clipboard is incredibly useful. I don't know about you, but when I'm working, I'm quite often copy and pasting from here to there to everywhere. So just to be able to select 3 back and paste it in again is hugely valuable. Or you switch apps and you forget the thing you posted, and it can be problematic. So I think that's a great thing, and I'm glad they've got that. The money seems about right, €1.50 for a year. Well, who'd hesitate about paying that? And apparently, once you go through the steps Apple make you jump through, it's an absolute joy to use and deploy. And the other thing I've seen about it is somebody installed this, and then they have an American iCloud account as well, and they flipped to that to see if it would disable them, immediately. And no, the alt store from the marketplace continued to work, so that's good.
Would it just work for 30 days though? Because you have your 30 days grace period. I don't know.
Probably. Somebody will test it and tell us, I'm sure. And then the other part, as you were saying, is it went live for the rest of the world in the App Store proper. And immediately, within 12 hours of release, was the #1 selling app on the App Store. And that's incredible and shows pent-up demand, possibly? I don't know what it shows, that there is a desire for this kind of stuff. And Apple have been playing a really weird game by not allowing these things to go. You let the alt store go live as a marketplace, and then you allow the app on the App Store. We wouldn't. If they'd allowed this kind of stuff, and we're a bit nicer to developers, and we're a bit more, I won't go on ad nauseum, we've talked about it, but look at the demand for these applications. If Apple had been really smart about this and allowed them, and they'd have been taking their 15 cents or whatever it was per install instead of the 30 and being mean about it, they'd still be coining it in. People want this kind of stuff.
Yeah, they do. There is a demand for it. I do wish Nintendo would give me a way to buy some ROMs from them. Let's do it properly. Let's not have dodgy sites or having to rip a ROM off a cartridge. That feels a bit archaic. It's a shame Nintendo don't do a store. And DRM it, do whatever you got to do. But it would be nice to have that option, I think. But no, it's great to see that actually an alternative app store's launched, and we've got some emulation. So I'm curious to see where all this is going to go. I'd like somebody to do a Master System emulator, please, because my first games console was the Sega Master System 1, nice big chunky red and black thing, and I used to play Duck Hunt on it. I think it was Duck Hunt and Mickey Mouse's Castle of Illusion, or Disney's Castle of Illusion. I can't quite remember the name, but this is from about 30 years ago, so that's what I'd like. But it seems Nintendo is the one everybody wants emulation for. But no, it is great to see this moving forwards. But I'm guessing though, I don't know. I'm guessing now Apple's still going to be Apple. And
well, they are,
you're
but
only allowed it for retro games, aren't you?
Yeah, but what's retro? If you remember back in the early days of the App Store, where there was IDOS and things like that, so you could emulate PC games and Commodore 64 and Amiga, and there's all manner. Amigas are really complicated because actually it's still an active company, and the Kickstart ROMs you need for Amiga emulation are challenging to get hold of. You can officially buy them from a company called Amiga Forever Clone 2, and it's not expensive. It's about £12, but I think if you can prove you've got the ability to have things like the Kickstart ROM legally, and the situation you're describing where you plug something into a cartridge that you've got, or a CD that you had, or a floppy disk that you once had, and prove that they are your ROMs, Apple haven't really got a leg to stand on. Legally, a lot of these consoles are, the C64 is a perfect example. It's abandonware at this point. Nobody really cares about C64 images, the games involved in them. There is still some IP attached to some of them, but most of them are just out there, as we've talked about before. And they're probably really important to computer gaming history. And there's some real value in the ability to play those, and allowing them on iOS or Android or whatever device that you want to play them on. There's no reason the PS5 couldn't have a C64 emulator, for goodness sake. Really lets kids experience the past of gaming and sort of preserves that. And I think emulators are a very good thing. I agree with you; they should make it easier to get. And Riley's doing great work here by doing it. And his emulator isn't just the NES; it's the NES, the SNES, the Nintendo 64, the Game Boy Advance, and the Nintendo DS. So that's a pretty comprehensive Nintendo emulator.
It is pretty cool. Do you think Nintendo will go after him?
It's been available for a very long time. I guess if he makes millions of dollars on this, then, and I don't know, did you have to pay for it on the App Store?
Nope.
Right. If he makes millions of dollars, and I'm not sure how he would, and maybe there's in-app purchase, I don't know, then Nintendo might be interested. But if he's not profiting from it, I don't know that they will.
Yeah, well, I'm going to have a look while you go, while we carry on to the next story. So why don't we do that?
Okay, so next story, and this is just, it's in line with something we've been talking about a lot on the podcast. So this is Joe Rosenthal writing at Six Colors, and he's asking, why does everything need to be an ad? And you see it, we've talked about it with Amazon, from paying an annual or monthly subscription to Amazon to get Amazon Prime, but also you get Amazon Video as part of that as well. Now we're getting advertising pushed on us. Netflix have been through that stop password sharing because they want people to see advertising. Apple TV, we've complained about it before. They do a sizzle reel for something else you could be watching on Apple TV before you get there. But it's worse than that. If you don't use Apple services, you get ads about Apple News Plus, you get ads about the various other bits. You get Apple Arcade and the rest of it within that. And why the limited spaces on our screens for things that we've paid for have to be an ad? And it's a really well written piece mulling over what that means for us as consumers. It's very difficult now to not get served ads even for things you pay for. We talked last week about Microsoft putting something in the start menu involving their ads as well. Why? We paid for the operating system. We paid for the hardware it runs on. You're already extracting information from us in terms of what you're logging from the system and its usage and all the rest of it. Now you've got to aggressively serve ads to us as well. And Apple are no better, Amazon are no better, Google are no better. It's just a horrendous state of affairs.
Yeah, I concur with everything you've just said. And we talked about Amazon doing it as well. They introduced ads, even though you're paying £100 premium a year for their Prime delivery and Prime video service. We're then going to show you ads on top, and you can pay another unlock fee to turn off those ads. So I do share it, and it does feel like we talked before about the cord cutting era being over. You've got to buy all these streaming services, and now you've got to buy the premium tier of all these streaming services to get rid of all the ads. It is insane, but obviously it must be making good money for them, otherwise people wouldn't be doing it. But yeah, it's frustrating. I hate ads with a burning passion because I think my brain is programmed just to ignore them.
Yeah, but when they take over 25% of the screen, as you talked about installing a fresh Windows the other week, and then some of those applications just being links to immediately go and install an application that you'd never have any interest in. And Apple's not there yet on the desktop, but it's certainly there on iOS. When you fire up the App Store, you are bombarded with apps for services. You're immediately faced with hey, you didn't buy AppleCare. Do you want to do that? It's becoming slightly uncomfortable. Even companies that we trust are shoving these in their faces so egregiously.
Yeah, completely agree with you. But it is a good article. I recommend people go and read it.
Yeah, very good. Moving on. This is just to throw into the pot of Apple being fined and Google being fined and others. We've talked about Holland before, but now Japan is turning up the heat on Apple, Google with threat of hefty fines up to 30% of annual revenue. Do you think them having paid the $2 billion fine in Europe and then being threatened with 30% of annual revenue for breach of the DMA and all the other things, and then another 30% from Japan, and then another 30% from the Competitions and Markets Authority, or whatever we do in the UK, and they do in Brazil, and they do in America, at some point they've got to realise, hang on, maybe we're on the wrong side of the law here.
Hopefully. And I guess this is why they've been keeping their big old war chest of cash, was to deal with some of this stuff. But no, hopefully at some point they're going to go, look, we need to change a few things here, tweak a few knobs, because we've got maybe the wrong people leading the business. They're the right people to get Apple to where it is today. But it does feel like you need some fresh thoughts at the top to steer it in a slightly different direction, which is more compliant with the laws in the rest of the world. And it does feel like the laws in the rest of the world are largely the same, but Apple just being Apple. And actually, if they did adhere to the EU and then roll that out everywhere, that would probably tick a huge amount of boxes for them and steer them away from these fines. But it does require Apple being different, and they need to be different, and they need to embrace it.
Yeah, getting back to sort of the original ideals of the company. But then, I was reflecting the story we were talking about before about not keeping minutes in meetings. It was Jobs that apparently introduced that at the beginning. So how much of the corporate culture of these guys who are still in charge actually that devolves down from what Steve said back in the day? And maybe you do need a new generation of people that do think differently, properly differently for this generation, not for the think differently of the 1980s generations. To actually be more in step with what's going on in the world. I gotta think it's difficult corporately to navigate that with politics the way it is in the world at the moment, and the swing to the right in not just America and the UK, but every country around the world, and their views of big business and how acceptable it has been to just be on that side of the thing. So it's really complicated, isn't it? It's just we as consumers and the public are beginning to push back against this, and at least the agencies that are in place in the EU and the UK and America that are meant to be devolved from the politics of this are, but it could be just as simple as all these big agencies are looking at big companies and going, we want some of that money. And even if it boils down to that, hopefully the consumers win as a consequence.
Hopefully the consumers win. I do like that as a fine line. No, I agree with you here. I do think Apple's days are numbered with the current management. You don't need to change all the management, but sometimes you just need to change direction, have a slightly different ethos. I wonder whether Tim's done what he needed to do. He's had a spectacular run, but actually, do we need somebody else in there now? That's probably my trail of thought. And it's rare for me to think like that, I think, but that's where I'm heading, because I just don't think Apple are changing quick enough. Everything's last minute. They don't embrace the letter of the law. It does feel like time.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't turning the supertanker. The iceberg was dead ahead 5 years ago. They've had plenty of time to try and do something about this. So everything at this point is on them.
But this is what the person at the top of the company's paid for. It's not to worry about the here and now. It's to have that forward-thinking vision. People lower down the organisation, worry about here and now, and as you go up the organisation, you've got to think about the next year, the next 10 years, so on and so forth.
Definitely. Moving on, and this isn't news, it's follow-up, because we missed it a couple of weeks ago. Microsoft is confident that Windows on ARM could finally beat Apple, and I saw a little bit of this. This is the new Qualcomm Snapdragon X, I think is the name of it. That Qualcomm got a bunch of sort of influencers and big chip companies to come along and have a look at, and it's doing similar to the Apple silicon chips and what it can do for emulating Windows layers. And so they were showing it playing some really sort of high intensity games and the rest of it, and it was absolutely mowing them down. So I think this shows the power of the ARM chip. And Microsoft has had a go at Windows on ARM, but this may actually be the thing that pushes them over the edge. Step away from Intel, let Qualcomm and somebody who understands ARM a lot better at it, and then potentially profit. If Windows laptops can run with the same sort of battery life, temperature, performance profile as MacBooks can, then that's a big win for Microsoft. And I'd love to see Linux being able to run on these kinds of devices as well, because the chips will enable that. It gets them away from the Intel AMD monopoly on this too. Kind of puts it all on Qualcomm and Apple. More on Qualcomm. They stand to make an awful lot more than Apple Silicon would. But this is interesting that you're seeing these gains for the Windows side of the fence as well.
Yeah, it definitely is interesting, and it feels interesting that Apple were the first to switch over, whereas historically they've been laggards in their chip transitions. When we were using IBM Power PCs, they were big and slow and very hot, and then here we are, Apple flipped to Intel, then they've gone to ARM. Microsoft does feel a little bit behind, but maybe they're going to catch up. So it can only be good, a bit of healthy competition all round.
Yeah, I wonder how much the Raspberry Pi has to do with this. As a low-cost ARM-based chip that came along, they were able to run server-type applications with it. Lots of people have Raspberry Pi sitting in cupboards doing intensive work for them day in, day out. Obviously, mobile phones were a huge driver of this as well because they were more power efficient and the rest of it. And that sort of push from consumer devices as were up to servers and, proper corporate desktops and things like that. It's just fascinating. And it has been properly transformative for the chip industry, I think. The big dinosaur of IBM is really struggling. Intel, not IBM. IBM's definitely struggling. But of Intel is definitely having its fingers put to the fire with this.
Yeah, Intel I don't even know what they're going to do at the moment to make a comeback. Apparently they think they can do it, but again, is it that too little too late? Did they take too long to turn the ship? And they could see the iceberg coming, because you could see it in the iPhones before Apple switched to their own chips, and so they must have known it was coming, but seemingly didn't seem to do anything about it.
Yeah. Moving on, because otherwise we're going to be forever in the news as well. Apparently keeping your data from Apple is harder than expected, so we've said it a number of times, Apple respect your privacy, apart from all the advertising we've already talked about. But this is some researchers have discovered that it's actually quite easy for Apple to get all manner of information from Safari, Siri, family sharing, iMessage, FaceTime, location services, Find My, and Touch ID from within this. This is university researchers sort of being able to make use of public APIs to resolve this kind of information. You kind of hope Apple wouldn't, but given what we saw before with them ignoring the analytics opt-in, opt-out that we talked about probably by this time last year, does make me slightly nervous that they're not quite as clean as they'd make themselves out to be.
Yeah, and I think that is the problem. They're not living by their own rules and what they portray publicly. And so when you find things like this, it's like, I guess they aren't that clean. So it is disappointing. Again, it's that whole leadership thing, isn't it?
Totally. The next, speaking of leadership gone awry, this is a really interesting piece in Ars Technica about the US government's over-reliance on Microsoft. And there's probably a bit for other corporations to dwell on as well, on its insistence on using Microsoft and not being fired for these things. But it's an amazing story, and just to sum it up, the position Microsoft has managed to get themselves into is being seen as the arbiter of what's secure, largely down to lobbying and largely due to their membership of a number of groups that put out technical standards. Us all expecting Patch Tuesday, I think it is, that you'd expect to happen from Microsoft. But they've become critical partners and advisors on security. So when things happen like the massive breach by the Chinese hackers of Microsoft's Active Directory, so people were able to pull very sensitive documents out of all manner of servers and things, it's kind of Microsoft can explain that away very easily because they are in the rooms of the most powerful people. And that continuous history of breaches ever since their antitrust sort of trial and their very successful navigation of that to flip themselves to not being the bad guys. Oh, we're not the bad guys. We've got good operating systems. We do our best. Look at all we're doing for security and protection, is one thing. But there's a quote from this that I thought I would pull out. With its market dominance and political savvy, Microsoft has ensured that officials almost never publicly criticize it, experts say. The government's uncomfortable saying bad things about Microsoft because they're fully committed to them, says Mark Montgomery, Senior Director of the Centre on Cyber and Technology Innovation at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies, a think tank. So think tanks are the only people that are potentially independent from large government and corporate entities. Think tanks can quite often be representatives of large corporate and government entities. So there's something there I'm not comfortable with either. But it's a really interesting piece, and I recommend anybody have a look at this Ars Technica article because it does make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think they are over-reliant on one. And I get it, it's an American company. They probably wanted to buy American, which I guess they should support their own companies. But equally, you want them to be not overly relying on any one company. They are the government, and even more and more as time ticks on, I think you've got to be more disparate in this day and age. It's certainly something we've discussed in the past.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we've talked about Gruber's sort of anti-EU attitude in a number of his pieces, and what comes through for me a lot of time is this is the foreigners taking against an American organization, and that's why they've got an issue with it. It's American corporate culture at large. It's their aggressive capitalism, for want of a better word, and it's the EU sort of pushing back against that. And I don't think it is that. We've tentatively titled this episode, as consumers get shafted, but that's this really, isn't it? It's nationalism is effectively what we're talking about here. Is American government wants to buy American technology. Chinese government will only use Chinese technology. All these kinds of factors. Have we replaced corporatism with nationalism? Where do the lines blur? For Microsoft, that's really weird, and maybe there's a bit of that with Apple too. It is fascinating.
Agreed. Should we move on to the news?
Yeah, we've done a fair bit of follow-up, haven't we? Yeah. So, news and some of our topics will come up again. First story in the news, Canada follows Europe with a digital service attack likely to hit Apple. So, this is again quite an interesting story, and if you sort of dig into this goes back to Apple and other big companies, Vodafone are no better in the UK, ability to avoid taxes for the markets they serve. And this is just to run through the bullet points in this 9 to 5 Mac article. Apple are used to a corporate structure designed to ensure it paid almost no taxes on hardware and sales. This is how it worked. Apple Incorporated in the US sold Apple Ireland a license to make and sell iPhones. Apple Ireland then sold iPhones to Apple France, Apple Italy, etc. It charged those European companies full retail price of the phone. This means that none of the Apple stores in Europe made a profit, so paid no corporation tax. All the profit was booked in Ireland, and a sweetheart deal meant it paid very little tax there. So this is wins all the way around for Apple, and you can see exactly why Microsoft and Dell and others would do the same thing. Put your base in Galway, sell it to the EU, sell at profit, no tax paid, winner. You get to keep all the profits of that stuff that comes in. Horrifying.
Horrifying, but not surprising, because we know Apple aren't the only one that do this, but that's quite a loophole they've exploited there.
Yes, and the EU came back with this, and they're now having it pay tax in the EU. Well done them. I wonder if we're doing the same in the UK. I'm sure we're doing so. We've probably got better. But effectively, Canada are looking at this now too. So hopefully, all these worldwide bodies are beginning to close these loopholes to make sure big companies pay the taxes they're meant to pay to benefit the companies on which they're operating.
Yes. Sorry, I was just processing the words you'd said. Yeah, no, I completely agree. The world is
countries,
bonkers, but it's good that Canada are following Europe on this, I think.
Yeah. Another thing the EU are doing right is it's telling Meta you can't paywall privacy. So this is in the EU at least, Meta are offering we won't give you any ads if you pay us a tenner a month or a tenner a year or something like that to remove those ads. You got to wonder if that's really what Meta are doing. Even though you pay it, I'm sure your data is still going somewhere else because they're dodgy and creepy.
But you shouldn't have to pay for that, though, should you?
No, you shouldn't have to pay for that. So it's just the EU looking into that, and they won't allow, Facebook or Meta to get away with these kinds of snarfing of your data kind of things again. So well done, the EU again.
And then next up, we've got AirPlay streaming finally coming to TVs in IHG hotels. This feels like this got announced back in WWDC. I think it was a long time ago, but it just seems to have taken a long time to actually get anywhere. And it's only rolling out to 60 hotels. I mean, I thought this was going to be thousands of hotels worldwide with LG tellies. You can now AirPlay your phone. In hindsight, it seems like a no-brainer. In hindsight, part of me thinks, I can't believe this hasn't happened before now. Why is it taking so long for this to roll out?
Yeah, it does feel very slow. I think hotels are slow to switch, though. They get a system in place and then they leave them, and they do like to have complete control over everything that's going in the hotel. I said in my Canadian and American adventure last year that everything was very Google Chrome, Google Stream, whatever it is, Google Cast based. Every hotel I went to had more or less the same system that was expecting you to use a Chrome tab to broadcast anything to your TV. This is good. IHG's a big group. They own Holiday Inn, for example. So, that's potentially an awful lot of hotels that could be part of this ultimately when it rolls out a bit more widely. I think they should support all the streaming standards, frankly. AirPlay, Chromecast, whatever it should be. They should support what people have got.
I always wish, and I think we did talk about this a while ago, that there was going to be one standard, because you used to get Miracast for Windows, Chromecast, AirPlay. Can we just have one solution, please, that everybody does? Because then you can go to a boardroom or you can go to a hotel, and it doesn't matter what piece of equipment you brought with you.
Absolutely. But we know what happens with standards, don't we?
Yeah, quite. Did I talk about my Mutter plugs not being able to add them to the home again? So it doesn't solve everything.
It absolutely doesn't. Tell us about the next story.
Oh, so next up, LastPass. I fear that LastPass are often in the news, but LastPass, users have been targeted with a phishing attack, and it sounds like quite a savvy attack of how they're trying to attack you on multiple vectors, whether it's email, SMS, or a voice call, to try and get you to divulge your master password. And your master password, if you use a password service like LastPass or 1Password, is the password. It's the one that gets you into your password vault. You shouldn't share it with anybody. You should have it written down in your safe, out the way, forgotten about, but you need to commit it to memory. And they're obviously attacking you on multiple ways to get you to divulge it, thinking it's that you're somebody from LastPass and you're trying to assist them. So very clever, but equally quite worrying.
Yeah, and they're getting targeted a lot, aren't they? We're seeing a lot of this from LastPass at the moment. They seem quite a popular attack vector. I switched from LastPass about 5 years ago at this point, because there'd been a big attack and a breach of customer passwords. I'm surprised anybody still trusts them at this point.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm amazed that we haven't seen stuff from 1Password. They must be getting attacked every day, because they are one of the bigger companies in this space. And if you got in somebody's password account, imagine what you could find out.
Absolutely. You store all sorts of things in there, not just passwords, software licenses. People keep their passports and birth certificates and things like that in there.
Debit cards, credit cards, bank accounts. The list goes on.
It's a treasure trove. And on that slightly terrifying note, the next story is the slightly nicer one. Google Maps is going to use AI to help you find out the way EV chargers. So this is actually a limitation of Google Maps, I think. It hasn't been very good in Android Auto or in your car for pointing you in the way of chargers. If you've got Android Automotive, that's different. It can work out where chargers are and the rest of it. But Google Maps itself hasn't been very good at this. I'll give Apple a little plug here. They will, through a little bit of jiggery pokery, give you charging en route. It doesn't know the state of charge without plugins and things like that either. But I think this is only a good thing. There's only more EVs out there. Knowing whether an EV charger is full or empty is really important for the state of your car when you get there. I can share a little story from dropping my daughter back to university last week. Teslas do this. They know how many Teslas are charging at any given supercharger location when you get there, and it shows on the map. So when you're planning your route, it will go, there are 3 stalls free. It will know who's plotted to go there, so it can predict how many stalls are going to be that free, which is great. However, one of our local ones at Sarn in Bridgend is having work done at the moment, and 6 of the superchargers were out of operation, and they obviously hadn't updated the system and thought there were still 6 free. When I got there, thankfully there was 1 free, but there was only 1 free. So none of these things are perfect, so that gives me a bit of hesitation about Google's plans here.
Yeah, and I wonder how it works with Tesla as they open up the charge networks to other cars. There's talk of Rivian using them in the States. I've never had a problem, but I don't charge that much when I'm out and about, so not a big issue for me. But the maps are getting cleverer. I normally just look on the map and see where a big green plug is, aim for that. I'm praying it's got a cafe attached to it and I can have a coffee and charge my car.
Do you not use ZapMap or something like that?
I barely do it, so it's literally never been a problem for me.
It's still a handy app to have. If I haven't recommended it before, maybe I should have made that app of the week. ZapMap is fantastic for knowing what's available, whether it's broken or not when you get there, which is also quite important.
I think you've already recommended it in the past.
I think I have. Let's move on for something I haven't recommended in the past, and that's using Twitter. Elon once said, I thought that was quite a good segue. One of the things Elon said when he bought it was about free speech. He didn't want people to be limited in the way Donald Trump and things had been kicked off the platform. He's now back on that, in case you hadn't been paying attention. It's renamed X, and now he wants any incoming users to pay in order to post. So that's not free speech. That's literally having to pay to make your voice heard. It's not a lot. It's only $1 to stop the bots. He doesn't like bots. But what do you think of this story?
It still blows my mind it's called X. I'm not surprised by this. I always think people, when they refer to X, they should go Twitter, sometimes called X in brackets, rather than X, formerly called Twitter. It's just nickel and diming, isn't it? It feels like he's bought this big company for far too much money, completely eroded any revenue out of it by annoying all the advertisers, and is trying to make up for it by nickel and diming the people posting, and the actual user base that enjoy using the platform. I've barely used it. I occasionally click on a link, but I've never signed into it since, I don't know, for over a year now. It's so frustrating because it was a good service, it was great. But I'm not surprised this is happening. There's going to be more of this, isn't it? Because he's trying to recoup his costs.
It is interesting. Our number of Twitter stories /X stories has drastically reduced as our interest in it has waned, but clearly so has the world. I saw a little story today that Hyundai had pulled all their advertising off the platform as of today as well, due to anti-Semitic comments. You never hear stories about people going back, do you? They only leave the platform. So I think it's a long, slow, drawn-out death of what was once a really useful service.
That somebody paid $44 billion for.
That somebody must be a business genius.
Quite. Shall we move on? We've got some Vision Pro news now.
Yeah, I know we don't have a lot of that, do we? So this is a very quick story. Microsoft have been quite a strong supporter of the Vision Pro. You've been able to get Excel and Word on there, I want to say.
And PowerPoint and Teams.
Yeah, more or less since day one, and now they've released OneNote as well. The application absolutely everybody inside of Microsoft uses, Microsoft OneNote.
I find this odd in a way. It's great Microsoft is supporting it, but it felt like Apple never really shouted much about it. I don't know. I've just found it really bizarre that they didn't lean in, that they've got a tentpole. You know, Microsoft's there with all the Office suites. You can use this for productivity day one. Yeah, I did think the screenshot looked pretty nice of the OneNote app. Looked kind of cool. I'm still waiting to try one of these in the UK, so hopefully they'll be coming at some point this year.
I mean, it looks like OneNote to me. I use OneNote for one meeting, so we've got like meetings going back to 2012 or something like that in it. So I'm familiar enough with OneNote and its notebooks and its way of keeping notes. And it's fine, it's a perfectly adequate note-taking app. It's quite good for collaborative working for that kind of thing. I don't think you're going to have enough people in your meeting with Vision Pros on who are all going to be using OneNote. It just feels like a really weird one. I agree with you. Why wouldn't they? There's so little Vision Pro news. Why wouldn't you want to highlight when something happens on the platform?
Yeah, I find it bizarre, but it's interesting. Microsoft have invested the effort to get all this done, to get all the Office apps in there. They are pretty good on the iPad, and obviously they've just, I'm assuming, taken their iPad apps and gone file save as Vision Pro. But yeah, it's interesting. I've also included a link to Best Buy launches Apple Vision Pro app for previewing tech products, which look kind of cool, but equally I wonder, will that app still be there in a year's time? Is there going to be enough people actually looking at it to warrant maintaining it? So I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, fair enough. And then last story in the news, the Pixel 9, which hasn't been released yet, so my cheap Android phone is a Pixel 7, is apparently gearing up for satellite SOS support. So this is good. I suppose it's maintaining parity with what Apple have done with the iPhone 14. Did it come to iPhone 14? I think it did. SOS support. So fair play. They've got to keep up with those sort of tentpole features, haven't they?
Yeah, 100%. I'd be interested to see when the Pixel 9 comes out. Are you going to be getting one?
Well, we might talk about some Android stuff in the main show and see how we're getting on with that.
All right, well, let's go on to media then, and we can circle back.
We can. Media. One of my favourite Apple TV shows is For All Mankind. Thoroughly enjoyed season 4. I think it is declining as the years go on, but not at a very fast rate. It's a rate I'm comfortable with. I think it's still a very interesting dramatic series that's doing good things. Season 5 has been announced. At the same time, they've announced a spin-off city called Star City coming to Apple TV Plus soon. So, yay?
Yay? Yeah, it is good. It's a good premise, and it is a good show on the whole. I think this is good news. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Spin City. Maybe they take a different take on it. I hope this isn't into one of those properties though that they just milk for everything and erode it slightly over time. But fingers crossed it'll be good.
Yeah, I hope so. Like I say, it's definitely one of my favourite shows on Apple TV Plus, and it's the one I look for coming back. I get quite excited when I know what's coming back. And they've been good at sci-fi, so I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt on Star City, with the exception of that constellation thing. I didn't like that at all.
Yeah, you did say that wasn't fantastic.
Still better than Criminal Record. Moving on, you can now watch Dune Part 2 at home. Have you?
I have not, but I am tempted to purchase this. I just haven't bought it because I've got a couple of other films I'm trying to watch. So as soon as I'm ready, I'll buy it. I usually wait until they're on sale, but it's £20 in the UK, which I think is fine. I'd have easily spent that going to the cinema, so I may well pick this up.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. It's really good. I think you'll enjoy it. It's a good film. And then last but not least, Spotify is planning, you can tell we haven't had a lot of time since our last podcast, Spotify is planning to launch more expensive Music Pro subscription with lossless songs. So Apple Music allows this within its current subscription model. If you're an Apple Music subscriber, you get high quality music, and you get spatial audio, and you get all sorts of bits and pieces that just come with a subscription. Spotify wants to charge you a little bit more for that. I think that's fair. It's in their remit. As long as they pay the artists more as a consequence too, and it doesn't just go to their pockets, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, agreed. I'm surprised they're not doing it included just because that's what Apple did, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yep. Anything else in media?
I did watch Steve Martin. I thought it was very good. Actually, I did fit that in this week in between our two shows, so it was enjoyable. And I learned a lot about him that I had no idea about, so I found it quite good. And he seems, for a man in his 70s, very active and all with it, so fair play to him.
I thought him and Martin Short both came out of it incredibly well, actually, for that finding each other late in life and becoming friends at the point they did. I'm not giving anything away by it for watching it for that. They obviously just connect on a fairly deep level, and it was really quite charming to see.
Yep, 100%.
Yep, good. Okay, games?
Let's do games.
So I haven't got any feedback on Shadows of Doubt, the game I bought last week. Unfortunately, I really haven't had a lot of time to play it, but we can follow up on a device that one of us bought and was very excited about. The Playdate has sold 150,000 games in the last year. That's a lot of games for a little console. How many of them have you bought?
I bought a couple, but I probably bought like 5. I just haven't played on it enough. This is probably a common theme in my life. I just don't play on anything enough unless it's Gran Turismo on my PlayStation or Threes on my phone. So I did fire up the Playdate the other day. I had a couple of games on it. It is cool. It is lovely. Do I wish it was colour? Partly. Do I wish it was backlit? Definitely. And I'm surprised there hasn't been like a V2, like a 1.5 with a backlight on it or an add-on for it or something.
I mean, they've done okay, I think. They're a software company. They've sold 70,000 Playdates to, quite a large number of users and have 181 titles in the store. That's not Nintendo money, but that's not Sony money, but as a brand new handheld, that's pretty good.
Yeah, no, fair play, 100%. And they've updated the OS and there's good developer tools. You can't complain the effort they've put in. They haven't just launched it and walked away. They've launched it, they've maintained it, they've added. It is fantastic. It's so well made. The software is good, and the games are quite compelling. They're just not longevity games, I would say, but it is a cool little device.
Definitely. I would like a shot on one at some point.
Yeah, one day we might actually meet up in person.
When was the last time that happened? I don't know.
Oh, I don't know.
Moving on, for time we did meet up in person, one of the first things we did together as, we became friends was at a LAN party. And this is just a little piece celebrating what it was like to have LAN parties in the early 90s, I guess it would have been.
Sorry, I was just looking at the picture linked. Who's playing games on that Power Mac G4? Like, that's not a gaming computer.
Yeah, so this is a blog called The Rise and Fall on the LAN Party, and it just goes through. I'm not forgetting what you just said there. I'm gonna circle back around to it. So early 90s, early 2000s, before we had the massively networked games that we're used to playing now, a LAN party, local area network party, was used to go around a friend's house or a conference centre or something like that, lug your massive heavy PC with you, plug in your massive cathode ray tube monitor and stick it on a table, and then all of you would sit bathing in the heat of 7, 8, 9, 10 PCs, whirring away as hot as they could be, sweating and drinking beer and, swearing at each other and playing computer games. And it was terrific. I mean, we had some serious fun doing that.
Oh, you can't beat it. I'm not a big online gamer at all, but being in person, playing a game against somebody, it's great to see their reaction if you kill them or you drive into them or you beat them in a race or whatever it may be. Really good fun. And yeah, loving these screenshots because it does bring back some memories.
And, I've got vivid memories of Unreal Tournament, and if you got, like, the headshot, if you didn't have your headphones on, it would go headshot, and everybody would know, your mate had just been killed, or multi-kill, or one of those things that it would do. It was really quite a perversely social thing, wasn't it? You had to get your friends together, it was a lot of effort to get up and running, and then you'd get there, and it'd be worth it for, 7 or 8 hours, because you weren't taking them away after half an hour, having lugged them all into the room. Yeah,
and there's always the teething problems of making sure he's got the right patch and the network's working, and the internet wasn't very good, and it was literally a different world.
It was, but then circling back to your point about the PCs that are assembled for these kids' LAN party, G4 Mac Pro. I mean, I guess there would have been Halo or something like that.
Power Mac. That's a Power Mac, Rod, not a Mac Pro.
That is a Power Mac G4.
Yeah. You said Mac Pro, so I'm sorry to correct you, but I like the Power Mac. I used to have one of those as a server.
It was a beautiful computer.
Yeah, it was cracking. It is lovely, but it was not a gaming computer.
Yeah, the one on the right's a serious tower, actually. There's a black tower on the right of the picture. That's a serious tower. And to be fair to them, they've actually brought a proper switch to them as well. I mean, we had some little, I don't know, I can't even remember the name of the brand off the top of my head. It's just left my head altogether, but that's a proper switch they brought with them.
Yeah, they're professionals there.
They brought a rack mount switch. But yeah, LAN party, I remember it well. I'm quite fond about that. Moving on, last story, and much as I knock Meta, and we knock Meta all the time, they have really sort of committed to the VR space, haven't they? I mean, they rebranded the company because of it. If you are into Meta, apparently you can get a Meta Quest 2 for $199 now, and they've halved the price of the accessories as well. So as an accessible route to augmented reality, virtual reality, that is quite a bit cheaper than an Apple Vision Pro.
Yeah, it's a great way of going for critical mass, isn't it? Make it cheap. There is the Quest 3s out, which is $500, so it's twice as much. But £200 to see if you like this thing and whether it makes you feel sick or not. I think that's quite compelling.
Yeah, if I wasn't so against them needing a Facebook account to sign up, I'd definitely be checking this out.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's pretty good.
Yep. And games like Beat Saber are meant to be fantastic. And it's funny, I've been listening to the Upgrade podcast, and Mike and Casey were talking about playing a Battleship game on their Apple Vision Pros. And apparently it's been available on Oculus devices for a very long time. So you could have that same experience on a device that's, well, a tenth of the cost.
Yeah. And are you going to see... Yes, I'm sure the Apple Vision Pro is lovely and the experience is great, but is it worth $3,000 more? I beg to differ.
Yeah, I really struggle to believe that. Anyway, if you're in the market for one, you can get one cheap now.
Perfect. I think I've got anything else on games. So should we move on to the main show?
Let's do the main show, and I think this will be fairly short in one sense. I thought it might be worth doing just a little bit of follow-up now. It's been 2 weeks since I started using Android.
Yeah, it would be good to get your views. The only frustrations I've got is when I text you, sometimes it's green, sometimes it's blue. It seems a bit like a lucky dip or a roulette. That's the only thing I've noticed interacting with you. So how are you getting on with it? What's the good, the bad, and the ugly?
That I'm probably not as together with that yet. I will bring it all together and do another little sort of video roundup at some point. So you're going to get a bunch of disconnected thoughts. That specific thing is interesting. You get me blue when I'm on my Mac and I want to send you a link for this show or something like this. You get me green when I'm on the phone and I'm wandering around. Does it not separate them in your chat? Does it still bring them together?
It did, but today we were texting ahead of recording and it just seemed to bounce in between the two. And I did have two chats. I think I need to text you one conversation just to your Apple ID is in your email address, and then have a separate conversation which is just your phone number. Or maybe sell it as your primary. It's a bit weird, isn't it?
I think this is a problem for Apple, really, that they've abstracted away so far from what is an iCloud ID or what is a phone number, or just in the interest of making it easy. The second you step back from that, it becomes a problem and it's not clear to me. And for my family, it's been easier because I just said, right, I'm not on text now. You're going to have to WhatsApp me. And they do, and it works perfectly fine.
Yeah, and maybe that's if ever anybody is moving away from iOS but keeping a Mac and wanting to text on the Mac, maybe that's what you've got to do.
It is interesting that things that require two-factor authentication, banking apps, or those kinds of things that want to text your number, they work absolutely fine. The text comes in, and it works in exactly the same as iOS. You get the little prompt at the bottom to say you've had a number by text, and you tap on it, autofills, and off you go. So the affordances that gives you aren't specific to iOS platforms. In fact, it's probably been on Android longer, who knows. But with the exception of you, I've had no pain points at all messaging anybody.
So it's my fault.
I don't blame you. I blame Apple for not making that clear. The second I turned it off in the settings on my phone, it should have separated those things.
Yeah, I don't think they do a very good job of it. And I'm the one person probably not on WhatsApp that you're interacting with. And probably if you are on the service like WhatsApp, it's separate to the operating system, and therefore it probably does work a lot more consistently.
And that's an observation I really want to make, is one of the things I've liked best about it is app developers and the operating system itself are separate. So the operating system is updated with security patches and all the rest of it, but the Play Store, which manages all the apps, are separate enough that Google can update the Play Store. They can update the music app. They can update the messaging app without having to wait for a significant patch to the operating system. And they've had to do that because of all the fragmentation that Android used to have. But actually the long game of that is that you don't have apps tied to major releases. So in the same way we had that app that I can never remember the name of, the collaborative note-taking app. Freeform, you had to wait for a major version of the operating system to have it. That could have just been dropped and updated at any point. And when you think about it, that's far more sensible. Let the operating system be what it is, and don't tie major applications to it, like music or whatever, to the operating system. So I really like that, and I like the method of updating it. You go to the Play Store app, you click, do you want to see any updates? And they update a lot and they update often, and you can either do it or just leave it to its own devices and it'll sort its life out. It works really well.
Completely agree with separation of apps and OS, and I think companies will be forced there over time.
Yeah, and you think how much easier would the life have been if they could just split Safari off into its own thing and not part of the operating system?
Yep, and I'd love to see these apps get updated on a more regular, little and often cadence, rather than, like you say, waiting for a big OS drop.
Yeah, because it's got to be hurtful to the developers inside of those apps. They finished some major bit of functionality months ago that, would make a big difference to people's use of the app. And they've got to wait for Apple to go, we've got to balance that in iOS 18 and what comes next, and is it going to give away secrets and all the rest of it. I think if they'd made those splits, they'd have a much easier time of it right now.
Yeah, agreed. Again, it's that whole self-regulation, isn't it?
Yep, totally. Customization, which is the thing, if you ever watch any reviews of people switching from one to the other, is what they always go on about, that you're not limited by icons in a grid, that you can have the sounds make what you want, it's easy to put your own files on there, it's easier. That's all true. It is all true. I'm not big enough in messing around with my phone. I don't want alternative app launchers and all the rest of it. I'm quite happy. I've got the ability if I want to. I know that it's there, but I'm happy with Google's launcher. I don't need to go and install something that gives you smaller icons or gives you fancy animations or anything. The stock Android that's on there, which is why I bought a Google Pixel, is more than good enough, actually. So I get the customization argument, but it's not one I'm interested in. I'm not bothered. I think I've been an Apple user for too long. I'm quite happy with what the manufacturer's given me from that point of view.
No, I can understand that, and we've obviously always had limited, I guess, customization options. But how are you getting on, like, with muscle memory and stuff, like just navigating around? Is it quite straightforward? Is it very similar? Or a week later, it's all fine?
It's different enough. A week later, it's all fine. But in the beginning, it was different enough that occasionally, like, where'd you go for the wallet if you're trying to unlock your phone to pay for something? I think I said in the very first time when I was talking about it that things on iOS that upset me or annoyed me, like the back button mostly being in the top left corner and having to reach for it, particularly on a plus-size phone, is a problem. And then Android having the ability to swipe right from the right-hand side of the screen just to go back in any application you're in is a massive time saver, and it makes complete sense. iOS brought in a lot of this gesture-based navigation, swipe up because you haven't got a button and all the rest of it, but has never really sort of capitalized on it in the same way that Android did. So while there is occasionally sort of bumps in my navigation, for example, the notification shade on iOS, to pull that down to turn off your Wi-Fi or put it in airplane mode, is go at the top of the screen, be on the right-hand side of the display, not the left-hand side of the display, and swipe down, and that will bring you the notification center. That's a double swipe on Android. So you pull down and it gives you the most frequently used things, so put it in Do Not Disturb or switch your Wi-Fi network. But if you swipe it down a second time, you get access to all the functionality of everything, as well as, imagine this, a little shortcut to the settings app. So you get a little cog at the bottom on the second swipe, do that, and it immediately takes you into settings, because that's where you want to be to change them more significantly. So in many ways, it feels better thought out than iOS.
Yeah, that is interesting. I would like that. There was talk of us getting a new control center last year, but obviously it didn't come to fruition. Maybe this year is the year.
Yeah, maybe. We will see. Notifications, I'd say, are where it does best in many senses. That the ability to manage and triage notifications as they come in is appalling on iOS. You can basically deal with them a little bit until they get to become overloaded, and then they start to stack. But how they alert you to what's going on, if you've got an Apple Watch, is one way, but other than that, there's just nothing. It's silent. It's either no noises at all, a little bit of vibration, and the management of them is bad. You can customize the notifications, and I'll step back a bit. Knowing you've got notifications, they start to stack up along the menu bar at the top. So, for example, my banking app, Monzo, has got a distinctive icon that looks like an M that appears at the top. So I can just visually, by picking the phone up, see if there's something from a banking app that I might want to deal with straight away that shows up in the top of the notifications bar at the top. And that's really powerful as well. You know, even before you start to deal with the notifications, you're already beginning to prioritize what's coming into you, as opposed to just having a long list of things that you've never seen before. It's quite a hard thing to sort of impart in words, but I think you can get what I'm guessing at, that you've got that ability to, even before you start scrolling, you've got an idea of what's about to face you. You've then got, with every single notification that comes in, you can customize it there. So let's say, for example, you've got a WhatsApp, you've got your phone on silent, and you think, actually, this is so important, I want the phone to vibrate, or I want the phone to make a noise. Next time this happens, you can press and hold on that notification and make that text or call or whatever they are, make it break through. Next time, permanently, or just shut up altogether, and actually I don't even want to see you when the notification pulled in. You've got so much control over what happens with that, whereas you can customize your phone to be completely silent, or go off all the time, or somewhere in between. So the thing I thought I was going to miss, strangely, was the mute button. I thought, everything goes to my watch, or had gone to my watch. I get a little vibration on my wrist. I was getting overloaded with little vibrations on my wrist. So that ability to manage them so much more carefully than you can on iOS has been a bit of a game changer, actually.
No, I can see that. And look, you're talking to somebody who got rid of his watch because he was cheesed off with all the notifications, and actually turns off most notifications or sends them to deliver quietly on my phone. And because I don't need everything, I don't need to know every email every second of the day. I go in and out of my email enough. So I understand that, and I would probably appreciate a little bit more granularity like you've got. So that sounds quite interesting to me.
The other thing, and this is a simple thing, I think of a bit of OCD when it comes to numbers on apps. So you'd look at, say, the LinkedIn app, and it would have 15 unread interactions for you to deal with in iOS. And that drives me crazy. I don't want to know how many you've got.
Just turn it off.
Yeah, you turn it off so you get no notification at all, that's fine. But you still want to know, maybe if you've forgotten because you've dismissed the notification, that something has changed in the state of that app. All you get is a little blue circle over this to know that there's something if you want to go and look at it. It doesn't tell you how many it is, you know?
So I turn off all the red badges on mine, I must confess. Because, again, I just don't want all those distractions.
But putting a number behind it makes it worse. And I don't know about you, but when somebody hands me their phone, like my daughter, and I swipe up and the email app's sitting there with 1,500 unread emails, or 9,000 or 50,000 or however, what the numbers, it drives me mental. Fair enough. Let me know with one little red star. Yep, there's emails there. Don't tell me how many there are.
Yeah, I'm with you on this 100%. That feels like a hangover from the Mac. The Mac had that, and then it went over to iOS when they first did it. I'm with you 100%. That's why I don't A, have it on, and B, when I pick up somebody else's phone and they've got loads of red dots, I can't look at it.
Yeah, so this is actually, and it's quite a subtle little blue hint to it as all, just so you know there's something there. It's so much more relaxing. I don't feel I need to chase off around the system getting rid of them all, because it's just one of those things. So there's lots of subtle things that are better. And I'm going to wrap this up, because we definitely don't want to go long. But there is a little bit of, I wouldn't even call it pain, I'd call it a little bit of cognitive dissonance, maybe, from switching from one to the other. But I've yet to find anything that's actually a showstopper.
I'm not surprised by that, because I think both platforms have matured so much and they've converged over the years. I think if you tried to do this 10 years ago, there may well have been some app not present on Android or vice versa if you're going the other way. But actually, I think they're so alike now, and third parties, big third parties, generally provide both apps because both platforms are big enough.
Yeah, and just a sort of final anecdote while I think about it. My bike, my VanMoof bike, has got an iOS app. It's obviously designed for the iPhone user because it's got Find My built into it. So, you know, they've obviously had Apple very much at the front and center of their attention going forward. I would have to hard reset the bike 2 or 3 times a week because my iPhone wouldn't connect to the Bluetooth in order to get it to go. So hard resetting a VanMoof, it wouldn't unlock otherwise, is the thing. You got to guddle around under the crossbar, find the button, stand there and hold it for 30 seconds, the handlebars flash at you, and eventually it restarts. And then the iOS Bluetooth stack would wake up to the fact that there was a bike there needing to be unlocked. Hasn't happened once with the Android phone. Same bike, same firmware, just a different operating system and Bluetooth stack. And I get close to the bike, like my car, it senses the phone is close to the bike and unlocks.
That's cool.
And that's the way it presumably should work on iOS. Now, I don't run you can't run anything non-stock on iOS, can you? I'm just running the app. It's authenticated in the same way. It's almost transformative.
Wow, okay, that is quite interesting. So you're not missing any apps. You're okay navigating the OS. You're quite enjoying it. And you're halfway through your month-long experiment.
Yeah, that's
like it's flown.
It's going more easily than I thought it would. I really thought I'd be opening up the phone, and I have. The phone is sat on top of my monitor at the moment, filming me in my iPhone. So it's not like it's not getting used, but I don't go back and check it on the day. There's no apps I'm missing. I'm sticking to the confines of what I'd set out to do as part of this experiment, actually, where I wasn't going to daily drive it. I wasn't going to go back and forth and have to put my SIM card back in it for something, or some app I'm particularly missing. Traveling will be a test because I'm on the battery of what is a couple-year-old phone. I'm out of my comfort zone. I don't have the apps I'm used to for traveling with, and things like the wallet, which is really good at train tickets and airplane tickets and all that kind of stuff. All that is going to be a bit of a revelation, and maybe I'll come back traumatized. I think I'm going to be surprised if that's the case. But yeah, I'm more impressed than I thought it was going to be. I thought I'd get by. I didn't think I'd be actively enjoying it as much as I am.
I think you're going to be fine travelling. Again, whenever I've been, whilst not with an Android phone, you can see everything's geared up for both iOS and Android devices. So I don't think you're going to have any problems. So
there we go. A little summary of my Android usage. Any last questions before we move on?
I think it's surprising how somebody that was with the iPhone on day one has so easily transitioned. And I do think some of the easy transition is because of the maturity, as I've said, but it's quite alarming how easy it is just to go from A to B and not look too far back at A.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there, isn't there? You're right. I think the ecosystem is much better than it used to be. That those big apps are there. Slack is there, and Outlook is there. All the things you'd want to be to get your job done are there. But then all the things you want to be there to get your normal life done as well. You can pay for parking. You can buy yourself a latte. All that kind of stuff is just it's built into it without a lot of problem. Your banking apps come over. It all makes that a little bit easier, and it does make me think the walled garden. Although you're definitely losing things. Like I say, I happen to be a YouTube Music subscriber, so I'm not paying for Spotify. I could use my Apple Music subscription if I wanted to, but I've deliberately made the choice not to install Apple-y type things on it, just to sort of properly step back from it to see what I'd be missing in that environment. And
I can see that.
So that's the experiment as it is, and we'll see how it continues. But so far, so good.
It is interesting. Like I say, I would probably be tempted myself if my work wasn't restrictive to just Apple devices.
But it does. If I get to the end of this, and I suspect I will go back to iOS because it's beta season coming up, and you've got to see what's coming next, and that's just been my character for the last as long as I can think of, actually. But come the next round of phones, when you're looking at, and we talked about the Google Pixel 9 a minute ago, and we're looking at the next Fold phone, and we're looking at whatever. I can go for the one I think I like the look of the best rather than the one I feel I've got to stick with. And I have felt that the iPhone has been very guilty of very minor evolutionary changes since about the 6, possibly before that. But that we haven't had anything, other than the switch to Face Unlock, have we had anything particularly revolutionary since?
Yeah, I'm just going back through my head. You're right, we've had lots of little things, all nice in their own way, but nothing transformative. I was watching MKBHD's video on the Humane Pin, by the spoiler, Humane Pin, not a great product, but he's got his S23 Ultra in it, and that's a good looking phone.
It is, and I might encourage you to try this yourself. Actually, that I know you depend upon it for work, and maybe that's a bit of a red flag for you that you've got to stop there. But go on holiday or something and just try and live the Android life for a couple of weeks and see how you get on. Because I would be curious on your take as somebody who's even less willing than I am to try out new stuff sometimes. I think it could be sort of quite interesting for you.
I think I am willing. It's just the work piece. If I could do my work on it and for 300 quid try it out, I probably would have done. I would have bought a tablet probably and tried that out for day to day, but I just can't for work. Maybe though, when I buy my new iPad and I get a smaller one, maybe then I could actually do it on the phone because I don't need to have work on my phone so much. And just try it that way.
Fair. Good. Okay. So that's the half-term report for Android.
It was good. Should we go on to App of the Week then? What have you got?
App of the Week, a very simple one. It's called iTerm 2. It's a terminal replacement app, which is a bit more modern than the terminal that's shipped with a Mac since it hasn't changed, I think, since OS 10. So you can do things with it. You can actually customize it and make it a bit more useful. So, for example, if you're not a big terminal user, little things like this won't matter to you. But if you're way down deep in directories and you do CD and you've sort of changed directories from the root level down to whatever, this will actually draw you a path for how deep down it you've got. It'll give you an idea of your SSH'd in.
That's quite nice, just that one feature there. Sorry to interrupt.
It is quite nice, just that one feature. If you're SSH'd into a client, it'll give you a timer for how long you've been connected. It's just it gives you a little Apple logo, so you know you're an Apple machine. If you SSH into a Linux box, it switches to a little penguin. Little things like that. The customization of it are far more flexible than what you get built in with the standard Apple terminal. If you're happy with the standard Apple terminal, well done you. Go for it. Have a great time. I quite like this at the moment. Thoroughly enjoying it. It's completely open source, and you can have at it. It will cost you nothing. iTerm 2, worth a look.
Cool. Thank you for that. Then next up for me. Thing of the week, I've just put in Race Across World TV Series 4, which is the latest one. I don't think I've done this as Thing of the Week, but I love this show. I watched it last night with my kids. I just really enjoy it. It's just a relaxing hour, and I've got to wait a week between them because it's something to look forward to each week. I do like that cadence. And part of me wishes some things would go back to that, where you've got to wait a week and you get one at a time. But I just love it. Just very relaxing, and it's great seeing a bit of Japan and South Korea at the moment.
Yeah, the last one in Canada made me go to Canada. So
it was an amazing advert for Canada. 100% was a great advert for it. The whole of Canada looked amazing.
It did, and equally this one. And I want to go to Japan and South. I wanted to go to South Korea before because the show I mentioned on the show called The Extraordinary Attorney Wu, which is filmed in South Korea. I did mention it. I'm pretty sure she's an autistic. Is she autistic? She's an autistic attorney, and it's just terrific. It shows South Korea to be just the most phenomenal place with interesting people, interesting laws, and a really rich sort of historical background. And I think they're going to show this in this series of Race Across the World too. I've been thoroughly enjoying it too. And like I said last week, my daughter applied for us to go and do it, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, if you go, that'll be amazing.
I don't think I'll go. I'm too well travelled, I think. They want people who are going to fight as well.
I think you'd make good TV value.
That's very nice of you to say. For those who watch the podcast, feel free to comment and say if you agree with Chris.
There you go. Anyway, that's it for this week. If anyone wants to get into contact with us, Rod is at g5maniac@mastodon.scot. I'm at _CJP at mastodon.social. You can watch us on YouTube. All you got to do is go to wakefromsleep.com and click on the YouTube link, or you can drop us an email at wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.